Welcome back to the Skylanders Ultimate Nightmare series, where I will be playing a solo run with every Skylander on Nightmare mode to see which Skylanders and which of their upgrade paths are better. For this video, I'll be tackling Zook starting on the Artilleryman upgrade path. Upgrades on this path include the Bazooka Shrapnel having longer range, Bazooka Shells and Shrapnel dealing more damage, and the Bazooka Shrapnel exploding on contact, damaging nearby enemies in a large area. You can already see as I fly by these early levels that Zook is very powerful. The Bazooka and the Mortar both have great range, great damage, and great splash area, so they can affect many targets. And he can set up a wall, so if enemies try and throw projectiles at you, you can block them. He does struggle a bit with enemies that charge up close and deal damage to you that way, as we'll see later, but anyone who stays far away doesn't stay alive for very long. For some enemies like this Executioner here, I can just stay back and set up walls and block every projectile that comes my way. Look at how quickly I'm able to take out all these enemies here at the end of Chapter 4. The Life Elemental boosted zone does help quite a bit, but even still, they're gone within a couple seconds. Any swarms with several small enemies stand absolutely no chance against Zook due to his insane burst damage and splash radius. The Goliath Drows here had a really nasty bounce, which gave me some unfortunate damage that was kinda hard to dodge. Starting Chapter 5, I just slid around the ice and shot some mortars at this guy, and then suddenly I bounce off of this corner in the wall and get hit by the axe, which is really unfair. I'm trying my best here to take down at least one of the Executioners before the Bag of Boom spawn, because otherwise it will be just too much in this area to be able to handle everything very cleanly. Continuing on towards the end of the level, there's still absolutely no issue, and we're able to close it out and head on up to level 6 already. One advantage of being a lobber is you can hit these guys before they even get a chance to come towards you. And the Archean Shield Juggernaut seems to think that my barrier is a higher priority than Zook himself, so that's quite good. I was talking about this earlier, but these guys who have shields and deal melee damage are quite difficult to get around. But most of my problems have been solved the same way, which is to stay far away, set up a barrier, and rain mortars on the enemies. Grenade generals are usually a pretty big issue, but for Zook being a lobber, you can lob the mortar bazooka shells up there and hit them early, which is really nice. They do still have a surprising amount of health. Mace Majors are actually giving me quite the issue because they don't let me stay far away, which is what I like to do, so now I have to play Ring Around the Rosie with them. Chompy Mage does get one good hit on me, but the battle is over soon enough. This boss fight is usually pretty easy because most of it is based around dodging and you get to heal throughout. Trollholm Security Castle has more high ground grenade generals we can take out before intended, before meeting up with the ChompyBot 9000 and getting rid of him swiftly as well. Here's a clip that's gonna end up in my Grenade Generals trick shot video. And as we approach the end of the level, the Inhuman Shields give me quite a big issue. Sometimes my mortar attacks and my bazooka attacks will hit their shield and bounce off, and sometimes they'll land behind or to the side and the shrapnel will be able to kill them from that angle. And Mohawk Cyclopses are also kinda tough. They're armored, so they can't get knocked back as easily while they have the armor on, and they try and move in right up next to you, which is not what I like. I like when this guy stands far away and just shoots at the rock and doesn't even hit me. That's pretty nice. The castle interior is going to be a very big choke point for a lot of Skylanders, I feel. There's tons of enemies, including many grenade generals. The area is not super big, so you can run away, but it can be difficult because there's grenade generals. And there's no food for a really long time unless you can get it from an enemy drop, which would have been really useful for me here, but alas. Moving right into run number 2, we now have Zook on the Floral Defender path. Here we get his barriers dealing damage to any enemies which come in contact with it, which is alright. Barriers and cacti knock enemies back and deal damage. That one's decent, but the real reason to choose this upgrade path. Mortar of Life. Mortar attacks grow a cactus where the shell explodes. It may not sound like much, But when enemies like to target your barriers instead of you, and this attack creates many barriers at once really quickly, you can start to see where I'm going with this. Now all the enemies that were chasing me down before are all gonna go for the cacti and distract themselves doing basically nothing. Not to mention that the mortar attack was already really powerful as it is, due in part to the Series 1 Soul Gem, where the mortar will split into 3 smaller shells upon hitting the ground, and also to the Series 2 WoW Power, where you can hold the tertiary attack button and send out many mortar shots at once. We're even able to place cacti on the ground in such a way to get Brock to chase them and run off stage, ending the fight early, which is really cool. And we're able to deal immense damage to these Goliath throws before they even realize they need to fight back. And when they do fight back, they don't know where to aim and they just can't hit me. This upgrade path is really good. One small downside is that the Executioner will do his spin and teleport attack rather than the long range throw, because he sees that there is enemies nearby to him, being my cactus walls. Normally I'd prefer they do the throw because they don't teleport around randomly with that attack. And when they teleport, they sometimes land directly on top of me, which is what I'd want to avoid. Absolutely no issues closing in on the end of Chapter 4, just like before. Although this time it's probably even easier. You can just see from the footage here, besides the fact that I'm doing so much damage, all the enemies are dealing nothing back to me because they don't even know where to aim. Same thing as in the last run, I was able to kill both Executioners before a single bomb got thrown into the arena, making this section not much of a threat, which it usually is. I did get a little bit of trouble when the Mohawk Cyclopses came out, because they spin so wildly that sometimes they move away from the cacti and towards me, whether or not they're intending to. Bark Demons become especially easy. They're already pretty counterable if you have any way to block their main attack, but Zook has a plethora, as you can see. Archean Shield Juggernaut decides to try and take out his own support first. Which, maybe that's a good idea, because the bomber always gives me bombs to use on them, so actually that's a smart move. As always, the Jousters are kind of difficult for Zook to deal with, but nothing we can't manage right now. And this Shield Juggernaut just gets absolutely wrecked. 2 bombs get thrown in and explode on him, killing him instantly. There's a life elemental zone here, which means the enemies stand no chance at all. This specific upgrade path doesn't actually increase the damage of your mortar at all, so it doesn't make those grenade generals particularly easier to take out, somewhat ironically. Chompy Mage is pretty quick and painless as usual. And heading into Trollholm Security Castle, the Mace Majors, which gave me a bit of trouble last time, now are doing nothing at all, just like every other enemy. The Chompy Bot has a lot of downtime in between its attacks, so I'm able to get ample damage here. And then he decides to retreat on top of this post and then fall behind the gate. I am very lucky I'm playing Zook where I can actually hit him, because if that were someone else, I might have gotten stuck there. The Inhuman shields here like to deflect all my attacks, but a couple of them get past. And at the end, I'm just trying to hit the Chompy Bot, but all the shields are tanking for him for a really long time. It took quite a while to actually get past them there. But before long, Chompy Bot is down, Zook moves on to level 9 Chaos' Castle. Despite this upgrade path upgrading your secondary attack, which is the barrier, I find myself barely ever even using it because it's just so much more efficient to grow barriers through the mortar attack, even if those barriers are smaller. It realistically doesn't matter how much health the barriers have because all enemies on Nightmare Mode are just gonna one-shot it. And now on to the castle interior. If Zook can beat this section of Chaos' Castle, then he'll be undisputably in first place for the rankings. So far, Zook on the Artilleryman and Trigger Happy on Golden Money Bags are tied for first place, and they've made it to here and died. Although we do take a couple of hits and it's not looking fantastic. It doesn't get shown in the video, but the Archean Cracklers take forever to kill. Most of your damage is good at hitting groups and enemies that don't like to move a lot, and those guys, they may look like a swarm, but only one of them can actually take damage. And I can't get too near to it or else it might spawn a clone on me and explode immediately. Floral Defender here has a bit of an upper hand against the other Zook upgrade path once it comes to the Troll Stompers, because his walls will distract them, of course, but it still doesn't mean they'll be easy. That being said, Zook has made it to the arena at the end of level 9, and although he doesn't have too much health, it looks like it's going pretty well, until I take a bad grenade hit there, and now I'm one shot away from death. And despite how many more grenaders there are, I'm able to pull through somehow and make it to the Jawbreaker part. Not before taking an extra hit though, just to make it close. And for some reason, Jawbreaker stands still and lets me kill him. I don't know, but I'll take it. Aerial attack starts us off, and I already failed to dodge a Drow Archer attack, so we're gonna begin this one with lower health. There isn't too much room to actually dodge here on the Dread Yacht, but thankfully the enemies don't seem to want to go for me. This Mace Major almost gets a pretty good swing on me, and I didn't dodge out of the way in time. He just happened to get knocked out of the way, which was pretty lucky. All these enemies get absolutely wrecked by the mortar, even this late into the game, which is pretty nice. And even though there's many Goliath Drows, they don't really do anything to me, yet again. At this point, I don't even use my primary and secondary attack almost ever. It's pretty much exclusively the mortars, just because of how good they are. This attack is pretty much perfect for taking out most enemies. As long as they move slow, I can tell if they're going to go for a cactus or if they're going to go for me, and tell whether I need to dodge or not. Here though, I should have been able to see that the Goliath Drow was aiming for me, and I should have taken evasive action, but instead I let him hit me and bring me down to 63. But luckily this was the end of the level, so we were able to beat it first, before dying. More inhuman shields impede my path a little bit, but they're not too bad. And the Blaze Grower, he doesn't have nearly enough range to reach me. The Crystal Golem later took surprisingly long to take down, although there was basically no risk of getting hit. For enemies that have a lot of health but don't move, they tend to actually dodge through the splitting of the mortar, meaning most of the shrapnel is actually not dealing damage to them. And the same thing is happening with Drill X. All the shrapnel is bouncing away and not attacking the drill. This boss took quite a long time due to what I just mentioned before about the attacks missing, and also the lasers that come in from the sky. Those don't get distracted by your cacti, meaning you have to run from them, you can't block them. But luckily it wasn't too hard to dodge, it just took a while. So eventually I was able to take down all 3 phases and move on to the next level, even with 3 lasers chasing me at once. These grenade generals are just hopping straight into my line of fire. What are they doing? You don't often get to see this, but you can actually destroy these huts before they spawn all their enemies. Most often that's going to be from a giant if you pick up and throw a boulder. While the Slobbering Mudicus still has the rider on it, it's not too difficult to take out, but once they get knocked off, these guys move insanely quickly and are so hard to dodge. Hard to dodge, that is, if you're locked into using your attack instead of running, like I was doing. Overall, I had a really good time doing these 2 runs with Zook. The Floral Defender path, in particular, I definitely think is a very viable candidate for who to pick to do an Ultimate Nightmare run. Here, of course, I only got 1 attempt with each character, but in the future, if I were to play multiple times, I would definitely consider Zook as a very viable candidate. But even if you have the Artilleryman upgrade path, he's very powerful, and for me made it to 2nd place so far on the rankings at Chapter 9. It's going to be tough for anyone else to take the 1st place slot and get farther than Zook did in Chapter 12.